people's time. So I think we might make a start. We are expecting a number of other people to join us, so I'm sure they will come in good time. So if I can begin by saying my name's Bron Burr, and on behalf of the Schools Plus team, I would really like to extend a very warm welcome to you all today to our webinar, One School's Journey of Implementing a Trauma-Informed Practice Approach, with our special guest, Jenny Parrett. I would like to begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land upon which each of us work, live and are meeting today. And if I can, in particular, to the Ngunnawal people where I am joining you from, and to pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. Once again, welcome everyone. We really appreciate this is an incredibly busy time for you all, and in particular for those of you who are navigating the return to school over the next few weeks. We're really thrilled to have had so many people register, and I'm sure will join us in due course. So really a very warm welcome to you all. I did want to take a tiny moment just to give a little bit of an introduction to Schools Plus for those of you who are less familiar. Schools Plus is a national not-for-profit set up to support schools to build their capacity to lead change and in turn help close the education gap. And since our commencement, we're incredibly proud to say, with the thanks of incredibly generous donors, we've distributed over $26 million to over 1,000 schools and touched over 300,000 students in communities across our country, in communities where disadvantage exists. That support comes in different forms. We support schools through funding and coaching to deliver projects designed around a need that the school has identified, that they feel that they need to bring about change and create new opportunities for the students in their schools. We also offer opportunities to share learnings and experiences from the teachers and the school leaders that we work with. And today's webinar is an example of that. We also manage, in partnership with the Commonwealth Bank and Schools Plus Pioneers, the Commonwealth Bank Teaching Awards, which have, we're pretty excited to say, over the last 5 years, recognised 60 of the most outstanding teachers across our country. And it's in that context that I have the absolute pleasure today of introducing our special guest, Jenny Parrett, who is the principal of Fallon High School, located in the border town of Albury in regional New South Wales, and also one of our 2021 Commonwealth Bank Teaching Fellowship recipients. Jenny, where do I start? Professional, committed, enthusiastic, inspiring. We have the opportunity to talk with you, to read your work, to understand what you're doing in your schools. And, you know, the list of adjectives I think can go on and on and on. But Jenny, you've made a lifelong career really of improving the learning and the life outcomes of students in rural areas, and in particular those students who need a little bit more support than others. Today, in this sixth and will be our final webinar in a series focused on wellbeing hosted by Schools Plus, Jenny will share her school's story in implementing trauma-informed approach to meeting the needs of her community, a dynamic rural community, as I've already mentioned, characterised by a high proportion of First Nations, migrant and more recently refugee students. She will touch on vicarious trauma experienced by her staff, its impact on their wellbeing and also the staff culture, the implications it's had for strategic planning, and also I think in her very authentic way reflect on her journey as a leader in what has been an ongoing and continually changing context. So with that little bit of an introduction to Jenny and her work and what she will talk about, the webinar will run for about an hour. We will aim to finish at 5 o'clock. Jenny's presentation will be approximately 30 minutes, 35 minutes, at which point we'll then break to a question and answer session. At that point, we will pick up many of the questions that people have so generously sent through with their registrations. But what we would like to do is encourage you very much throughout the presentation to please add any additional questions that might come to mind through Jenny's presentation, and we'll certainly pick those up at the end. And similarly, if there are comments or thoughts or resources that come to mind that you think might be relevant to the group that are as participating in the webinar, we really encourage you to share those in the chat as well. And what we'll do then at the end is collate those if it's helpful for people and share them back out as well. So please, as I say, thank you for the questions, and we'll bring those back at the end. And I'm sure Jenny will actually touch on some of those at any rate throughout her presentation. But please take the opportunity to gain as much as you possibly can from the opportunity to listen and engage with Jenny this afternoon. So on that note, Jenny, I might, if I can, thank you in advance for your generosity and collegiality in sharing with us this afternoon, and hand over to you. So over to you, Jenny.
Thanks, Bron. And look, I'm really happy to be here. Welcome to everybody, and thanks to members of my team that I can see here that are here to maybe also verify some of the stuff that that has been shared in this. And I will preface this by saying that this is an authentic description of our journey. This is not about how wonderful our school is, although I do believe that it is an awesome place. It's also about a very real journey, and it has its pitfalls and it has its moments. And I don't believe we are in a finished space just yet. So I'm just going to share my screen. Won't be a second. And I will just, if somebody could just tell me that we're right to go.
Good to go, Jenny.
Fantastic. Thank you. So I have titled this Getting Ahead, the Journey of One School, and it absolutely is a journey. I have been a principal since 2014, and it takes one issue or one young person or a change, and I think that sometimes as a principal you're back to square one in many ways, but that's what makes the journey interesting. I too, just a moment, I'm just going to, good, is that working? I too would like to acknowledge that today I am giving this presentation from the beautiful lands of the Wiradjuri people, and I pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. And this slide says so much about a very important aspect of our school, and that is that we have an amazing cultural diversity, and these beautiful young women are part of why, the big why of why we are here. The two sisters at the front, one has managed to achieve an academy, dance academy place in Sydney, and her sister is engaged in the hub in Albury. There are some young people here who are prefects, but there are also some people who are now have their families of their own at a very young age, and there are some young people who don't speak because they are too timid and they have incredible anxiety, but they can dance. And they are an amazing ambassadors for our school community. They haven't been able to dance much during COVID. They need an agent. They have lots of gigs, but they are awesome. And these are our Wiradjuri Echoes dance troupe, and the girls, some of the girls in that. So in terms of this, my presentation is around a little bit around what we're doing to support our young people in our space, and recognising that many of them are refugees from their own households, but not giving them the label of poverty as a definition, and making sure that postcodes don't determine your destination. But also in visiting that, I want to explain a little bit about what we're doing in recognition of the work that we have in terms of compassion, fatigue, and trauma and vicarious trauma, and also the ways. I don't think I have all the answers. I don't think anybody does, but we are attempting to navigate that. So in terms of that, I'm going to describe a little bit around our school context, around some of the things that I have done and continue to do as a leader, and the lessons that we've learned, a little bit around our journey and some pain points that have been worked through and navigated. And I'm part of an awesome team of staff and a school community that is not afraid to look at its setbacks and feedback and move forward. In terms of next steps, what we want to do is look at those moving forward. So James Fallon High School is a comprehensive public high school in North Albury of New South Wales. It was named after the first mayor. It used to be known as Albury North. And when it was known as Albury North, it was considered to be the roughest and toughest and most horrible school in Albury. I still get lots and lots of comments about the time that the Year 12 class went out and fornicated on the cemetery headstones in a really tasteless manner. But that happened about 40 years ago. So that might tell you a little bit around how reputation might stick. We had, at the beginning of the year, 761 students, but in that, even though we only have 2 postcodes in Albury, we had as much diversity as you could poke a stick at. So we have at least 97 students, and I think probably at last count, we were looking to create a discon for another 4 with a disability confirmation. That means they've had to get their paediatric assessments, they have to have a consult, they have to have a process around that. So we have a lot of students who don't achieve that, but we would still say that they have some form of learning adjustment. We would probably have, last count, 200 and I think about 305 students who are on the NCCD. So almost half of our school population. We have students of Aboriginal background. Most of those are from Wiradjuri and from our local area, but we do also have young people from other backgrounds and other mobs that come here because it's got some great employment opportunities, and they do often move between towns. We have a lot of young people who speak English as an additional dialect. Prior to COVID, we had an intensive English centre because we had so many students in the earliest phases of learning language. And we have a huge staff. So we have everything in between. We have on the My School website, our ICSIA is in the 900s and declining. And we have in that about 62% of our students in the lowest socioeconomic quartile. So we do have students who are in a space where they do struggle. We would have a number of families that have not worked in 12 months paid work. And we have a lot of students who are under the care of the minister. So, for example, at the beginning of each year, I'd say we would have a transition plan is one thing that we have when an out-of-home care student has a change. So probably in our Year 7s, we would have at least, I think, double digits, but we would have at any time probably around 20 to 25 out-of-home care kids with current transition plans, which means a lot of movement. We do have a lot of change. It's a very transient population of the school. I would enroll at least 2 or 3 students a week, and we would see probably around the same leave. Our retention to Year 12 is usually at around 60%. But that is due to them finding employment outcomes or not actually completing the HSC. And there's many moving parts to that place that I call the Community School of James Fallon. So we have an 8-class support unit, and we don't call it special education because there are so many diverse learners in there. They're called the diverse learning faculty. We're a big picture school. I am passionate about the big picture education, and I believe that that's some of our proudest work, and that is personalised project-based learning. It is a phenomenal curriculum design, and I absolutely love it in our school. We are partnered with Clontarf, and we have established an academy for 2022. We also have been lucky enough to get a Fair Education grant in consultation with our two partner schools, which is Albury North and Candia, who are on our site. We are a professional experience hub up until this year, where we look at innovative practice around pre-service and teacher education students. We're also a fast stream school, so we have a candidate that is looking to fast track through a promotions process, and so we have leadership and mentoring here. We have heaps of partnerships for our students around early entry schemes. And so therefore we have a partnership with La Trobe University that provides a conditional offer to Year 11 students at the end of their Year 11, so that they can have a destination, a transition to university at the end of Year 12. Out of our students, 78 students, we know the destinations of 76 of those young people this year, and they have all been accepted to many destinations. We are so thrilled about that. We have students who have done that, and they don't have to worry about the mark. And also we are part of a collective impact project with the other two secondary schools in Albury, Murray High School and Albury High School. We have a collective impact project known as the Albury Project, partnering with Yes Youth and Family Services, Albury City Council, CAMS and Headspace, to look at how we might retain students to Year 12 and reduce youth homelessness. So there's so much, there's lots of balls in the air, but that's because we look at the students and what they need and think about what we can fit, not what we've got and then think about the student next. A little bit about me. There's a couple of images down there. I am somebody who loves to learn. I'm a Bankie's daughter that had 7 different schools growing up. So I'm a bit of a hybrid person who adapts really into all sorts of contexts, and I love all sorts of walks of life, but I love learning. It's the way that energizes me. I had a Premier Scholarship to Pompeii when I was a head teacher of history. I had a fellowship when I was in the leadership space of the Secondary Deputy Principals Association. I was really, really lucky to get an Art of Leadership scholarship through the Public Education Foundation for Harvard. So before COVID, I got to go and spend time there. That was pretty awesome. I am studying my doctorate at the moment with the EDE cohort at the University of New South Wales with a class of people, which is fun. And I have been so fortunate to be a teaching fellow. I'm overwhelmed by by this honour, and I must say I had a little bit of imposter syndrome when I received the accolade. It is phenomenal to be in the company of such great fellows, and I'm inspired by all of them. So I've had lots of opportunities, but I would say to anybody that wants those opportunities, if you don't apply, then you don't get them. So you need to put yourself sometimes out there and have a go. And what's going to happen? What's the worst thing that could happen? Very wise lady, Chris Causey, said that to me once. And I thought, what is the worst thing that could happen? I don't get it. Okay, that's all right. I can live with that. I am though somebody who lives and works in the country. I am a country girl. This is my farm. This is where I live. I live on 185 acres outside of Albury, in a little town called Gindra. It's a metropolis. It has 2 roundabouts and a service station. And I believe that there are many, many strengths to rural education, and that a metrocentric lens on rural education is not the way you need to see rural people. They have an awesome way of living. They have an awesome way of considering language and numeracy and space. They are some phenomenal rural identities, but there are huge challenges to being rural, and gradually I see that there is so much that that I believe seeing rural people for what they are is really, really important. So one of the challenges might just be this one. This year, the HSC was moved in New South Wales by a month. All right. And now I absolutely understand and appreciate why. We've got to have that HSC exam. We've got to do the big dance. We've got to sit them down. The HSC's got to be the gift at the end with the exam. However, all the rural students that were booked to do harvest, the most bumper harvest that we've ever had for a long, long time, can't do that now. Right. So the extra 30K that they could earn in harvest to get their finances together to move to a university in an urban area is not achievable. Right. My son had to work 2 jobs to actually move to Melbourne. And so it's not easy, but that decision, and I bet you no one ever thought, oh, what does that do for the rural kids? I remember seeing distinctly lots of urban people going, oh my goodness, the rural kids are going to get more advantage than us if we're in lockdown and they're not, right? But they're, it's just a way of seeing and a way of thinking. When I was growing up, a hospital was built in Corowa that was meant for Cara, but the people in the Sydney area could not conceive that there would be 2 cities with 1 O being the difference. Sometimes it is about thinking about what is out there in our communities as awesome, right? And rural people have a resilience and a focus and a community spirit unlike any other. So I believe that there are so many strengths, but acknowledging that rural contexts are their own, not a deficit to an urban space, is so important. Leaving James Fallon High School, these 3 photos of me, I guess, shows a little bit around how a principal might be able to age you. In 2014, I was relieving as the principal, and in 2016, I was appointed. The first photo of me, I love white shirts, I must love white shirts, is me at the beginning of my high school journey. The one sitting outside before the sign is me in the middle, few more wrinkles there. And then the song lines of my experience are definitely out in my fellowship photo. Yeah, there is certainly age and wisdom that comes with that. I guess though, in leading James Fallon High School, there's been some huge pain points, and I think that the context of our place changed enormously in the period around 2018. We had our socioeconomic index in New South Wales is known as a FOE, and ours increases in our space from 128 to 141 in 18 months. And we basically had an extra third of our young people come from disadvantage. And that was really, really hard to navigate. And lots of young people who came from areas that, that required a different approach. And our approach was, here is the consequence, right? You do this, and this is what happens. I remember saying to kids, there are 2 things that will see you suspended. 1, if you hit somebody, and 2, if you swear at a teacher. That'll see you gone. And we had a situation where we had massive critical incidences. I'll never forget the 28th of February last year, where we had massive critical incidences around our school. It was so tough. And we went, what do we do with this? We had 2 amazing deputy principals who tried to navigate the space where they soaked up all of the critical incident management and the dysregulation of our young people and the emotionally charged young people, and tried to protect all of the people in our teaching, in our classrooms, because we saw the senior executive, we managed the grist, as we called it, and then everybody else gets to teach, right? But what that did was just burn us out to a crisp. And what it meant was that one deputy principal went on long leave, returned, and then resigned. And then in 2020, the other deputy principal resigned as well. And so we were in a space where we went, wow, all right, what do we look at next? We now have a team of 4 fabulous women in our organisation, 3 deputy principals, and I don't know what we did before we had the 3rd. I really, really do not. But that meant that we were navigating the young people with adverse child experiences. And probably if I was to do an anecdotal head count of our young people, I would say that out of the 10 adverse child experiences, we would have young people here, probably half of them would have at least 4 or 5. And as a result of that, you know, we've got young people whose home lives and whose lives themselves set them up to a space where they are reaching a barrier that is really hard for them to cross. So, you know, you can look at the Kaiser research around this and look at the fact that a lot of young people, if they suffer from household challenges, abuse and neglect, that they will, according to the data, project themselves into a shorter lifespan, a higher risk of substance abuse, and those issues around disability are there. We have, out of the 56 young people that are in our diverse learning faculty, we have 54 of them that have a disability in mental health. So they are at a young age, have not been presented with mental illness. They have been diagnosed with a condition that is therefore so pronounced that it will become a permanent part of who they are. And that is a really, really, really hard thing for young people to navigate. We have a lot of young people with post-traumatic stress disorder. We have a lot of people who have massive trust issues with the adults in the space, and they have that flight or fight response. Their amygdala is really well developed and their cortisol is right up, and they are people who will give it to you before they don't. And offense is often their best form of defense. We have a lot of young people who are in our care, and as educators in a high school, we are in loco parentis with young people who have had years and years and years of a build-up of different adverse child experiences. And so, you know, in relation to that, we have a moral imperative in our school to make sure that we can support them to the very best of our ability. But that doesn't mean that always you send them out the door with a suspension. And that is a really difficult place to navigate. And I'll explain a little bit about that in a minute. But I'm going to stop talking for a minute and ask you for 3 or 4 minutes to personally reflect on this question. Often we go home at the end of the day and talk a little bit about, with our significant others, maybe even our puppies, about how the day went. When you're an educator dealing with traumatized young people, what kinds of things do you, can you, or will you discuss? How is it different from the days of other members of your family? And I'd really like to see if there is an opportunity to see things on the chat. I'd really like your thoughts on this if you would like to share. Thanks. All right, I can see some people on the chat, but I can't read them, Bron, because I'm doing the presentation style. Is there anybody that would like to share? Are you able to read some out for me? You're on mute.
There we go. Really happy to do that. And in fact, if others would like to join in and share their own, welcome to too. But a message here from Zimka. I'm sorry if I've pronounced that incorrectly. I'm a foster parent and a teacher, so what I see at school I feel I can share using anonymous names with my husband, as the issues may be relevant to our boy. And has mentioned major impact when you're allowed to talk to anyone at home. Hardy's, any thoughts I share are very general. Confidentiality means I can't reveal names or schools. Murray, my wife and I both worked in the same school and could talk about the experiences and understand each other as we knew the kids. Now that we are in different schools, that is no longer possible. It is certainly different as the conversations don't happen anymore. Another one, Susan, the behaviour I have found difficult today. However, I felt what I did, and I think you might be still going there, Susan. So I invite you to sort of join in and finish that comment if you'd like, Susan.
All right, thank you very much for sharing.
Yeah. There are a couple of others here. I will just follow off. I try to make sense of what the students' needs are and how I can meet those needs. That's from Catherine. Yeah, that's it.
Great. Look, I think it's really important to acknowledge that the work that we do in this space is incredibly special, right? And we touch this space that not everybody does. And so, you know, I could go home and I could say to my husband, Jim, and some of you know my husband, Jim, and I say, what did you do today, Jim? And he'd say, oh, well, I fixed the tractor, right? And I sprayed the fence lines, and then I had to make a phone call about a job that I've got to do with a bloke, right? So I then can say, well, do I say, oh, well, I dealt with a child sexual assault, or, you know, some young person explained to me what happened to them on the weekend with their family. What do I do that? Am I able to do that? It's a world that not everybody actually genuinely understands. And look, you know, I swim with a group of people who don't live in this world. They just don't. And so when they hear something that might be attained to me, they're mildly curious and then quite repulsed. But that's not, you know, that's a really interesting space to be in. How do you actually then navigate that space where you have dealt with a young person, and I'm not saying dealt with in that, you've actually had to deal with it yourself, but you've navigated something with a young person that is on the side of life that, as a middle class person, how do you manage that? That's not part of what you do. It's part of what you care about. And so part of what we've done in our school journey is actually acknowledge that students are at the center of what we do, but staff are around them 100%. And how do we try to make sure that our staff don't reach that space where they are burnt out? So while we do talk about trauma-informed practice, we also consider the vicarious trauma that is experienced by members of our school community and our staff. So into defining that, as what I see, is that it's experienced by those who work with trauma victims, impacting on their own mental health through exposure to constant trauma. You know, I think about when my daughter used to do something mildly naughty at school, and I think, gee whiz, is that the best you can do, honey? And, you know, that's a bit hard lined. You know, that's not necessarily the family values of whatever. Oh, we do, but it's how it is. And it's all found in first responder professions. And I'm really, really thrilled to a degree that we are now people who are considered to be first responders, and therefore we're required to be double vaxxed, because we've always been first responders to families. That is not news to us here in this space. And so we have had a team that have experienced vicarious trauma, compassion fatigue, and secondary trauma, and it has genuinely impacted on our school staff wellbeing, our school culture, and strategic planning and leading the school. And I think that that's something that needs to be acknowledged. So I'm just going to show you a graphic of how this works. So, you know, we have a number of cumulative impacting effects of dealing with, you know, working with young people who experience trauma, and how they navigate that trauma, and the co-regulation, genuine co-regulation, is really hard. It is really hard work. And we see these young people every single day. When they come back from school holidays, we know that we have a 2-week window where they're going to play up. And probably the week before we go away on holidays, they treat us like a parent that's going out to work. They're not happy with us, many of our young people. And sometimes you can feel genuine fear, because if they are angry and they are not in a good space, they can often be aggressive, and that is really, really hard. So, you know, honestly, if we suspended every young person that used a bad word in our school, then sometimes our suspension register would be groaning. But often it's communication. It's not a behavioural choice. And that is really, really, really important. But if you take this trauma and this compassion, you take it in the body, you take it with you, you take it to wherever you can, and actually navigating that space and finding that space where you can place the experience of working with young people in trauma is a really challenging space. I don't think we're there yet, but we've explored lots of different options, which I'll talk about in a minute. So I guess one of the biggest pain points in our space this year, and that's where the outline is around how we've navigated COVID. So COVID-19 in the border region has been a constant journey, because we live near Victoria. And Victoria has had a whole different legislative decision-making process to New South Wales. And we've had a border restriction in place since June last year. And we've had all sorts of operational challenges as a result. In this year, I think we've experienced a tipping point, which actually happened just after the Fellowship Award, lady. So the imposter syndrome was absolutely there. I felt not just like a duck, I actually felt like some days I was drowning. So we had lots and lots of staff, and half of our diverse learning faculty lived in Victoria. At various points, we thought, no, they can't come across. We had a snap lockdown in March and they couldn't come across. We had letters that we had to give HSC students who could come across if they were in Victoria. We couldn't, we had families groaning under the weight of the fact that their business or their workplace was in Victoria and they couldn't go across. You know, and all of those things were a really, really big challenge. We also decided at the beginning of the year to put in a new learning management and communication system called Compass, which is also Victorian. And it meant that a whole raft of communication platforms had to be learned. And we also have been challenged with the fact that we wanted to really sincerely reduce our suspension register and make sure that we weren't suspending young people, and genuinely planning for that. And probably around winter in Albury, when the average temperature is around 11 degrees, and you had all of these things, you had what I consider to be a tipping point. So we had a period of time where, and June is generally like this for us. We have a lot of people who become generally unwell. It's cold, it's miserable. You've got a long time before you get to a 25-degree day. And there was a lot of community fatigue. So we had imperatives around our system targets to improve attendance, invest in behaviour rather than manage in behaviour, and looking at student outcomes, improving our NAPLAN outcomes. You know, our strategic improvement plan is around improving those things and having student attainment as the mandatory goal. We did have a massive staff shortage, and this does bother me. And in Albury, where it's a beautiful place to live, we have staff shortages all the time. It does my head in to think about how that might work in a place that's a little further west than us. You know, where you've got principals taking a third of a load and having to manage all of the other administration work. We have had massive community fatigue. The spikes that have happened in the major capital cities have been exacerbated by things like the border. And we've had bubbles that have been big, small, tiny. We've had 2K radiuses. We've had, you know, all sorts of things that have happened in that. We've had police in busloads come here, and a lot of fear around what happens there. And we had school fatigue. You know, we had minimal supervisions in our school hall. We had all sorts of ways that we were trying to navigate this, and it was really, really, really challenging. And of course, we therefore had young people who had who had stresses of their own, and they were externalizing. And so we had some very high-end behaviours from some young people there that were, that were showing some behaviours that were not easy to navigate. So what we decided to do was survey the staff to think about what we could do to work that out. And look, part of that was around staff wellbeing and navigating vicarious trauma. They listed a bunch of pain points: the understaffing aspect, student behaviour, the lack of resources to have some time away from students on site was really important to them. School security is massive for us to feel safe in our environment, to have our students feel safe and our staff to feel safe. And variations to routine are constant, absolutely constant in our space. And how to actually work that through was a really important identification. What, therefore, we looked at is supporting students and supporting staff. So supporting that area. So maybe I haven't written that the right way, but students are at the centre of teachers' work. And suspension for a traumatised young person is not ideal. But when teachers are feeling unsupported and disempowered, they will feel disenfranchised. And when staff feel disenfranchised, often the negative narrative becomes part of the loop. Oh my God, I'm so sick of that. Oh God, I've got an extra. Oh no, I'm going to have to deal with that kid. Oh, that kid's going to be in my class. I really, really, really don't want to see that kid. They'd come back from suspension and there was this, you do the re-entry and then you'd walk them to class and the teacher would go, oh, they're here, right? Oh, I don't know. And they would avoid that ownership, like they didn't want to take that young person on. That's the deputy's job. And potentially that was the old style. The deputies used to soak up that work and not expose staff to that. We've got an SLSO who saw a young person in a dysregulated space this week who had spent his 6 years here as a student of this school and never seen any of that kind of behaviour. And he was quite taken aback by it. But we said, that's what we do. He said, and then that's what happens. And he said, oh, I've never seen it, never, never. And so, that whole, it's the deputy's stuff to do. And then they would also take a lot of leave. And that meant that there was pressure on those staff that were remaining on site to take on the cover. So there were some people who had the grand piano of extras and cover, and those that had the piano accordion, and then some that didn't even have the mouth organ. It was pretty hard. But the result of that is that student learning is impacted, that there's more dysregulation and there's more trauma responses and there's more suspensions and there's a vicious cycle. So acknowledging the staff is important for staff, but it's also so important for students, and it became an urgent priority for our space. So our journey around navigating vicarious trauma is really, has been one that's been, let's see what we do, because we're kind of cynical bunch. They're going to go like, well, do we have to workshop and meditate? And oh my, what are you doing? So we started with a private company called Align Health, and we had a counsellor and a physiotherapist come on site to look at ergonomics and counselling. And some of our people used that, and some of us went, oh, for God's sakes, no, we're not going to do that. I remember a presentation where a member from the team came and gave us a presentation on psychological safety in the executive. And she said, your crowd is the hardest crowd I've ever had to work with. We also had Safeguarding Kids journey that lasted for 18 months, where members of the Health Safety Directorate and the New South Wales Department came and worked with our school. And of course, COVID hit, and that was really, really hard with that space. But we did, out of that, get some great recommendations. And one of those is our communication platform, which I think has really improved, and also wellbeing space and how we can work that through. And we're in the process of developing that. So then we looked at a bespoke kind of thing, a contextual thing. So we have somebody who works with our school now, who is a local, who works gently around the edges and works with a few people. Being well at work is what it's called. There's a few little bits and pieces that they do that aren't in your face, but they're just there if they're needed. And I think that that's probably a much better fit. And we started that this year. We also, though, the identification was a professional learning, equipping ourselves to meet the needs of others, and architectural considerations. We have architecture that is 1960s. We have A block, B block, and C block. And, you know, that's where that is. It's not really trauma-informed architecture. So the next personal reflection question is, and I've only got a few more slides, is what do you believe the most impactful wellbeing tool is that for teaching staff? Like, what is it? If you were to look at staff wellbeing, and I'm a leader of the school, and you want to tell me, Jenny, this is what I think you need to do, what is that? And that's a picture of our puppy. He's a big dog now, and his name is Fallon. We do have a therapy dog at our school. So have a think for a couple of minutes. If you were to give me some advice, what do you think it would be? All right, guys, lay it on me. What do you think I should do? Yep.
I might kick off with some of the messages here for you. So create green spaces and animals. You can't get upset or angry when someone walks around with a cute rabbit. Time for teacher impacted to debrief with someone and swift action. Choice theory as a practice embedded into the school, a common understanding the brain and human behaviour to inform our response. That was from Murray. Staying connected with peers from Catherine. And Susan O'Leary also mentioned earlier, I have a friend who worked as a counsellor who always met regularly with someone to debrief. So that debriefing theme it's just built into her work. And recommend it be done for anyone working with trauma. There's another one here, also drawing from public health and allied health sector. Debriefing with colleagues is considered crucial for them both, for their own mental health and wellbeing, but also their professional development. We tend to discuss everything and anything each night after work. Was one. And Laura here, another suggestion. I worked previously at a school in Melbourne that had a great wellbeing team that incorporated counsellors and social workers who worked with students and staff. They also had a team of resilience workers who were students in counselling social work at university who did placement at the school and were placed in a year 7-8 program to help staff and students with complex behaviours. It was invaluable for staff wellbeing both in class and out. Also, a question here, what is the name of the therapy dog? I was asking as you have contacted local traditional custodians for a name. Have you?
They're fantastic
just a side question.
Yeah, we should. This has been. This is a webinar, so we can keep the chat, can't we, Bron?
Absolutely.
Awesome.
Absolutely.
Excellent. Yeah. And look, you know, I do believe as first responders, in paramedicine, in police, they have people to debrief. They have a program around that. But it's really interesting. You deal with a critical incident and then you have to go and put your game face on and go to assembly. So actually navigating a time for that is important. So these are some of the things that we have done to navigate that space. In Being Well at Work, we have what's called Cafe Joe, which is a bunch of our staff who meet on a Monday afternoon when they're feeling a little bright and happy and having a cup of coffee and working through, and some questions are asked about how they're feeling and how they're going. All of our staff have done assist training and will be involved in youth mental health first aid. We have a facilitator here for both of those to navigate mental health and wellbeing and a response to that that is concrete and user-friendly and empowering. We have staff wellbeing discussions in our faculty meetings and how we navigate that. And we are looking at how we might support each other in peer support programs, but actually giving some of our staff tools to do that. So we're not all just accidental counsellors in our own space, because the last thing you want to do is take out your day on somebody else. We have also, and the staff responded to this, we want to create an opportunity where we're actually doing some professional learning around behaviour, but also around navigating complexity. So at the beginning of next year, we've said to everybody, your compliance training can happen at another time or online. And we have got a whole 2 days, our first 3 days of staff development will be from social solutions called Getting Ahead. They have taken away the label of Bridges Out of Poverty because it is a label that disempowers and is there. And we're also the pilot for the Crisis Prevention Institute for Classroom Culture. And my professional, my scholarship, my fellowship is contributing to that. And I'm so pleased that we're able to give our staff tools and equipment to do that. We are also looking at architecture. So we are looking at wellbeing spaces. We have a regulation space that we are using at the moment. We've got solution rooms outside of our deputies so they can sit and calm down before they talk to the deputy, because they immediately think they're in trouble. We've even got little notes now where we have silly emojis on them that say that you're coming in for a friendly chat, because everyone that comes into this office thinks they're in trouble, which is really sad. But it is really challenging in a 1960s building and working with assets to achieve that. But I guess for us, the most important part is that the structures and the processes are there. So this year we, with the help of my director, who's a fabulous human being, went through a school development review, a system-driven one where we identified the terms of references, and we have 8 recommendations that are non-negotiables. We need to do them in the next 12 months. A lot of those were around clarity and communication, accountability of staff, consistent roles, responsibilities, transparency of decision-making, and consultation versus collaboration. The biggest wellbeing tool for us is making sure that when one person steps forward, everyone steps forward and no one steps back. Because you want to know that while it might be a bit challenging, we're all in it together. So I think that we are not there yet. I think that we are in a space where we are not there nearly. We are partway through. I'd love to present maybe in 2024 and see where we're up to, whether I'm a little less older. I'm certainly not wearing white today. And that we have that opportunity to share and debrief as we go. So thank you very much for listening to my presentation, and I hope that you got something out of it. I hope you feel like you can be world conquerors, because we certainly are not, but we are authentic human beings trying to make a difference in the lives of young people. So thank you.
Jenny, thank you. Thank you very much for a fantastic presentation that's just sparked so much thinking and thoughts from people, and certainly can see that through some of the comments that are coming through. We did have some questions, as I mentioned, and I wonder if I can go to those, unless someone has a question that's online now, and we can duck to that as well. So I'm just having a quick look. Either share it in the chat or just pop your hand up, and I'm happy to throw to you. Otherwise, I'll wait to hear from you, and maybe just pick up on one of those questions then, Jenny. One of them was around the time frame with the work that you're doing, and just the question was, what is the time scale to establish a trauma-informed approach in a school, including the training of teachers from inception to completion? Now, you've already said that you're still on this journey, but can you just give a sense there around time?
All right, so I think that there are periods of time where there's a sense of urgency, and keeping that in mind is important. But how long is a piece of string? I really think that, I mean, I'm a real believer that everyone has their own journey at their own pace and their own time, and you move at different spots and different places. So, you know, in terms of this, I think it's been really timely. But in terms of actual cultural change and making sure that it's embedded, I think that 3 to 4 years is really important to actually make a practice important. One of the things that happens here that we want to stop is that we have an initiative that's a fabulous idea, and then we become reactive and it takes us sideways, and then where did that go? What did we do? How did that happen? And we want to make sure that we stake the course with this. And I guess this is most contextually appropriate because it's about our kids and where they're up to right now. So I would say that that's what we need to do. So in terms of timeliness, I think that, you know, holding a nerve in 3 to 4 years, that's where that is. I'm really proud of the fact that our suspension register has been halved this year, but our attendance data is just, right? So we're really looking forward to, we're also really big believers in outsourcing. You know, we don't have all the answers, teachers don't have all the answers, and why do we need to be the holders? So we have OTs and psychologists and you know, Clontarf and partners coming into our place all the time because we are a community school and we need to reflect that.
Thank you, Jenny. Another question here, and it sort of moves away a little bit from the focus on the staff, and it question is, how does your school support students with anxiety to self-regulate without encouraging avoidance behaviours? So a very specific one there.
Yeah, excellent. Sorry, okay. My deputy just walked in. So I'm going to just look at how we support students. Is that the one that you asked me, Bron?
Yeah, it was.
So in relation to
anxiety.
that, with anxiety, it's making sure that every young person has the opportunity to try and feel comfortable and safe, but also taking every young person to to a space where they're comfortable, and that's not easy in a noisy school, right? So giving them space, giving them time, giving them take-up time, giving them those things, it's vital. It really is. And anxiety presents itself in all sorts of different ways. I'm really proud of the work that we do in Big Picture. We have lots of lovely, interesting, dynamic learners in that group, very intelligent, but many of them present with anxiety. It's a safe place for them to fall. But also we have safe places for them to fall in support classes and safe places to fall in the learning centre. You know, those, making sure you've got architecture to do that and finding pockets, it's really, really important. But also having an adult that is able to advocate for them and caring about them and using words like, I really care about you and I hope that you're okay and you don't look so good today. Is it okay if we talk? And walk and talk and not fluff around with that. You know, the assist training tells you, are you contemplating suicide? Are you having suicidal thoughts? Rather than, oh, are you having a bad hair day? Is really important. And also framing it in positive, proactive language. How are you? I'm great. How are you? You know, is really important, not, oh, I'm okay. Welcoming young people into a classroom and making sure that they know that you're happy to see them also dispels that anxiety, because often they're really worried about what you think of them. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, look, absolutely. Thank you, Jenny. Folks, I'm very mindful of time and that people are busy and need things to go to. So I do have a couple of other questions, but what I might ask is, Jenny, you might be able to help with some responses to those and we might be able to share them back after the webinar,
sure.
If that works for you. And I might sort of, if I can, draw our conversation to a close today. And if you have any other questions, please pop them in the chat now and we can pick them up later. So in doing that, can I extend an incredibly warm thank you to you, Jenny. Incredibly authentic presentation. You promised that, you delivered it. And as I can see in some of the comments, really inspiring the work that you're doing, the care that you show to your students, to your school community, to your staff, and the commitment you show. So on behalf of us all online today and certainly the Schools Plus team, thank you.
My pleasure. It's great to see some friends on the screen.
Really, really grateful. Can I also just extend a warm thanks to my colleague, Anna Bethlehem, who operates behind the scenes to bring our webinars together. She's always here, so thanks very much, On. And of course to all of you for creating the time in your calendars to come and join us this afternoon and listen with Jenny. Can I also, for everyone who is on line tonight and who are teachers and school leaders, on behalf of the Schools Plus team, give you a World Teachers Day month shout out and day. We certainly recognise the work that you do in making a difference to the lives of the kids that you work with every day. And we just want you to know that it's appreciated from where we sit. And I think, you know, Jenny, your story this afternoon illuminates once again the incredible need for that level of support that each of you bring to the kids that you work with every day. So thank you from all of us.
Awesome.
Guys, we will send a link out we have recorded today's presentation is what I'm trying to say, and we will share that link with you and welcome you to share that with your colleagues. It will also be available on the Schools Plus website, and we have a knowledge sharing hub section on our website, and I noticed, I think it was one of the other, I think maybe Catherine asked the question around what are others doing around trauma-informed practice, and one of our other webinars led by Julie Murphy in South Australia in a primary school setting also touched on that. So that may be of interest to you.